earlier you were talking about this nation-ending exercise that the United States is planning under the Trump administration. And you've talked about how that immediately goes nuclear. You've been on my show before, too, about escalations with Iran. They've been happening under the Trump administration, sending, for example, the aircraft carriers, which, in the past, you've talked about how Iran has missiles that can take those out. So what does this nation-ending plan look like that goes nuclear? And what exactly would be the consequences? Because we've talked some about MAD, but we've also talked about how it'd be devastating for Iran. But it appears to me there's so much devastation to go around with this. How exactly does this happen or occur and work?
I've not been in the government for a long time. And if I were in the government, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So it'd be a lot of speculation that goes into us. But let me just say, let me paint the picture of the thinking that's behind this. The first problem that will be put up there is, how do we rapidly eliminate Iran's nuclear infrastructure? And Iran, unfortunately for it, has been totally compliant with its obligations under the Safeguards Agreement. So there is no secret here. We know where Iran's programs are. Inspectors go there. And I'm pretty sure Iran understands that these inspectors are debriefed in detail by foreign intelligence who are looking for weaknesses. Now, the IAEA can pretend that it doesn't happen. And I'm not saying that I know that it happens. I'm saying that I know what happens.
I'm sure it happens. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
and that comes to people like me, who then I get engineers, and we sit there and we try to reverse engineer the data we've been given to determine, the physical properties of each target. And once we have the physical properties of each target identified, we have to determine the level of destruction necessary to achieve the objective. Whether it's destruction of centrifuge capacity or whatever. Again, I'm just saying that that's what needs to happen. We identify the physical properties of the structure, the level of destruction necessary, and then we match a weapon to that. So each target will have, I've done this, each target has a workup sheet that says, this is the target, this is what needs to happen, this is the weapon. And then there's another one that allows battle damage assessment to say, this is what we're looking for to determine whether or not objectives have been met. So each target has this targeting package put together that then gets turned into a strike package. It gets sent to the operators, who are told what the location is, the weapon system, how time of flight, if there's any navigation ahead, all that gets programmed in. Boom. So we take out, I don't know, let's say there's 15 targets we need to take out in the nuclear. I'm just throwing out an arbitrary number here. 15 targets. So we've done that. Now we have to take the next step. If we do this, what is Iran's response? And Iran has promised a devastating response. So we then say, what do we need to do to interdict, to the extent possible, Iran's ability to carry out this response? And so we go back to intelligence, and we know Iran has these underground cities. So we scour the intelligence to look at potential construction to find out where it is. We then, again, build up a model of the facility, what we think is going on inside the facility. We are actively collecting intelligence. Again, Professor Marandi knows this. Intelligence organizations are trying to speak to your engineers, to people who work there, to people who may have been providing, construction assistance, and to build up this capability so we have an understanding. And each one of these then is assigned a weapon capable of achieving the objective. Then the next thing is, if we're going to do this, then what is our goal and intention with the government of Iran? I believe that the United States, unless Donald Trump has issued orders to Tulsi Gabbard, and I hope he has, to terminate our regime change plans, the CIA has been working, and Professor Marandi, you know this. You know what happened in the summer of 2023. You know what the CIA did. You know what British intelligence did. They are working with groups to bring down the theocracy, the government of the Islamic Republic. And so we have that. We know, I'll give you an example of the thinking. Desert Fox was the American attack on Iraq in December of 1998. Ostensibly, it was supposed to be a strike to remove Iraq's weapons of mass destruction capability. But a major component of the strikes were the suppression of Iraqi security and an intelligence effort to recruit Iraqi generals who would then, their facility would not be struck. Those soldiers would then march on Baghdad to remove Saddam Hussein. It was a regime change exercise. Everything we do is a regime change exercise. Everything we do. So I believe that if we were to strike Iran, it would become a regime change exercise, which means then we incorporate the targets that are involved with communications, security, government services, and the government itself, a decapitation exercise. This will be complicated by reality. But again, Professor Marandi, I'm not making this up. You know how Haniyeh was killed. And you know what tool was used, a drone that was not launched from outside of Iran, but a drone that was launched from inside Iran. There is capability embedded in Iran that is designed to achieve regime change. Haniyeh was killed on the day of the presidential inauguration. This was one of the most deeply insulting things that Israel has done. It's murder, but it's also meant to be an insult, but it's also meant to be a statement of capability and capacity. I'm not threatening Iran. I'm telling you my thinking. And my thinking is that if I were in charge of this campaign, I would initiate the campaign with drone-level strikes against Iranian leadership to take out as much of the leadership as possible, followed by an immediate attack on Iran's nuclear infrastructure and retaliatory capacity, and then sustained strikes against their communications and their leadership, all the while the CIA and their allies seek to rise the people up against the regime. That's what I mean by nation-ending exercise. This is purely hypothetical on my part, a lot of speculation, but it's based upon the fact that I've done this before against Iraq, and I'm familiar with the thinking that goes into these kinds of strikes. So now people say, oh, you're threatening Iran, you're trying to bully Iran, you're trying to scare Iran. No, you asked me a question. How do you get to that? I just laid it out to you. None of this is meant to be a threat. None of this is meant to be anything other than statements of fact based upon past experience applied to potential future objectives. That's what I meant by nation-ending exercise.
I understand what Scott is saying, and that this is not meant to threaten Iranians. All I would say for the audience is that the Iranians know American capabilities, and the Iranians have themselves counterintelligence. The Iranians feed the Americans false information. Striking Ismail Haniyeh, regardless of how it was done, was not a difficult thing to do. There were hundreds, if not more than 1,000 guests in Iran, and they were all in different guest houses, and no one was expecting that sort of attack. It was a big mistake on behalf of Iranian intelligence. But remember, the deep state almost killed Trump. So it's not as if this is unique to Iran. Of course, they tried to say Iran was behind it, or Iran was behind an attack to sort of, I think, hide the fact that they're the ones who were trying to kill him. But anyway, because I think your audience should rest assured. If tomorrow Trump is assassinated, I have no doubt the Americans themselves did it. But anyway, try to blame Iran, but the Americans did. But Iran's underground cities are vast and extensive. They're unknown. The people who made them, many of them don't know how extensive they are, where they go. They're across the country. And if there's an attack on Iran, their response will come from across the board, and they will immediately destroy everything. And they have hundreds of thousands of drones, and more than 100. Remember that the missiles that struck Israel, no one could stop them. The missiles that would strike targets in the Persian Gulf will get there in minutes, and there are many, and they could the Israelis couldn't stop them. Stopping them in the Persian Gulf would be impossible. And then, of course, you would have the Americans wiped out in Iraq by the resistance. The regimes in the Persian Gulf would all collapse. I have no doubt if Qatar is because Qatar is where CENTCOM is. If there's a fight, then that's the end of Qatar. That's the end of gas. That's the end of oil in the Emirates. That's the end of the billions and trillions of dollars that these regimes produce and waste on buying junk from the West. That's the end of oil production. Yemen would take over Saudi Arabia. All the oil assets in Saudi Arabia would be gone. I don't think the Caucasus would do any better. That would, and then of course, a nuclear attack would have implications in the world that I think would bring an end to many things for the United States. That's a worst case scenario. And Scott is just saying that I think basically what Scott is saying is that the United States, there's such sinister people in the United States that this is a plausible outcome. And Iran has always prepared itself for such madness. But remember, the same engineers who helped the people of Gaza create this defense capability, they're the people who, along with the people of Gaza, created a defense capability where it's almost been 2 years now, and the Israelis, who thought they'd finish this in a couple of weeks, they're still just slaughtering people. And Hamas and Islamic Jihad, their casualties are much lower. They're well protected underground. They come out, they hit, they go back, and the Israelis just kill people. The same is true in Yemen. Those defense capabilities the people of Yemen have created, their heroism in Hezbollah, the same. But in Yemen, the Americans are striking targets that are non-existent. Why? Because Yemen is very good at misinformation, counterintelligence. So it's a complicated game. Well, it's not a game, but it's complicated. War is evil. I fought in war, and I've been to Iraq. I was in the city. I was in Mosul when it was liberated. I was there. I think I took the first person to take footage of the Masjid Jama Nuri, the Nuri Mosque, where Abu Bakr Baghdadi gave his first speech declaring the Islamic State. I took footage of that and I showed it on RT that very day. It was the first time that I was actually a cameraman of sorts. I've been to Syria and I've seen fighting in Syria. I didn't fight, but I've seen fighting in Lebanon. Of course, I was there during the first week or so of the war. I know what war is, and war is horrible. And I do not wish any war in this region to take place. But Iran will, if Iran appeases the United States, it will not end with the nuclear program. It will go on and on and on. And Iran, because of its religious culture, to a large degree, it won't accept humiliation. This famous slogan that we have from this grandson of the Prophet, Hayhat min adillah, it's deeply entrenched in Iranian culture and society. Having said that, Ayatollah Khamenei is one of the smartest people around, highly educated. He speaks 4 languages, and he's a philosopher. He's well read. He's read many English novels. He's a very smart person, very wise, and he, I think, knows exactly what's happening. The Supreme National Security Council, the president, all of them will collectively make the right decision, I'm sure. I may disagree with A, B, or C, but I think the general direction that the country takes will be the right one. Iran, I have no doubt that if the United States is reasonable, there can be an agreement. But that will not have anything to do with Iran's support for Palestine. It will not have no impact on Iran's support for Yemen. Iran will continue to support the resistance. I'm talking about the nuclear program. If it respects Iran's sovereignty, Iran's rights, if the United States is reasonable, there are ways to solve this. But if the United States is unreasonable, then we will have a big problem and Iran will remain steadfast. I think that Scott is hopefully right, that Witkoff will probably come in and say, you have to do this, that, and then the Iranians will say no. And then Witkoff will have to go to plan B. Hopefully, sane people in the United States, they will have the upper hand, but there are Zionists. The Zionists are not sane, they're not humane, and they are dangerous. So again, my final word is that all of us have to focus on the real enemy. And I mean all the viewers. And that is those who are carrying out genocide, those who are pushing the world towards destruction. I go to China a lot. I've been going to China for many years. The nonsense, the nonsense that they say about the people of China is and I go to Russia quite often. The nonsense that they say about Russia and China is similar to what they say about Iran. China is a very advanced society. I've just been to Guangzhou a couple of weeks ago, and Chengdu as well. Very sophisticated people going out at night, families going out. They are human beings just like everyone else. And when Vance, the U.S. Vice President, calls them peasants and
cringe,
this sort of racism and disgusting racism, it shows that the problem is in the United States, because it's not just Iran, it's not just Russia, it's just everyone, the other. So we have to focus on countering this narrative, and people are waking up. We have to be optimistic. Look at the recent polls about the Israeli regime in the United States. Even the American people, now the majority of them disapprove. And this, I think, is a lot of credit due to those people who are active online in the United States, on the streets, especially young people. And the rest of the world, of course, is far more hostile towards the regime. So I am optimistic about the future, although there is danger ahead, and we must all work together to put pressure on those who are creating danger for the region and the world.
One of the big takeaways from today's conversation, though, definitely, especially toward the end here, is that, we really are, as a planet, as humanity, we really are depending a lot on the rationality of emerging powers like Iran, like Russia, like China. I mean, look at what Russia is doing right now with the United States as the Ukraine conflict still continues, and there's the negotiations and the dancing. Iran, too, has, for so many years, through its rationality, has negotiated with the United States in good faith and met the commitments. And now we have a big challenge now where you have the United States under Trump, yes, but of course this has a long history of Iran being threatened, the aggression toward Iran building up, and as Scott, you alluded to, this very real threat of a catastrophic war. So the big debate that has emerged is, well, what does Iran do? What happens from here? And the big challenge is Iran has its sovereignty to protect, has its interests to protect, its self-determination to protect. And it's just so hard to imagine how much more can Iran give before it becomes capitulation. And now that is, I think, a very dire question. Yes, Professor Marandi, you're right. Like the United States, yes, this is the source of the issue. And Scott, you've also said this today too.
Peace can be the only outcome here. And if you're not working towards a peaceful outcome, you're the problem, not the solution. And I say that to the people that are encouraging Iran to develop a nuclear weapon because they somehow believe they have an insight on what deterrence is. I think the Iranians know what deterrence is, and they've been very successful at it's straddling the fence, so to speak, to create leverage without crossing the line to where it becomes real. And then Iran has done the right thing in terms of adjusting its position as needed to achieve an outcome that prevents a war. And I have faith in Iran's capacity to do that again. Managing the United States is an impossible task, because we're not just a petulant child, we're a petulant adult that's been on steroids and can kick the hell out of just about anybody who confronts them directly. So how do you bring that under control? You don't confront it directly. You use the art of the indirect approach. And Iran is very effective at that. So is Russia. So is China. And I think at the end of the day, the United States can be managed to avoid doing something precipitous, and we can get an outcome that will be acceptable to everybody. And eventually, even a steroid infused madman will calm down eventually if given the opportunity. And I'd like to believe that we're going to bring closure to this, to Iran's nuclear problem, the problem of Iran's nuclear programs. But I think that we have the potential now to reach a deal. I don't think this will be a deal as a presidential executive order. I think this will be quantified as a treaty. And I think it will bring closure to this. I think Donald Trump is truly interested in telling Israel, drop the Iran problem. We have no desire to bomb Iran on behalf of Israel, none whatsoever. But we've boxed ourselves into a corner. We've created a problem from our own imagination, and we've boxed ourselves into a corner. And we're too proud and too stupid to admit this. And so Iran has to help us out of this. That doesn't mean capitulation. That means wisdom. That means understanding your opponent and working with others to find an off-ramp. And I think what's happening in Oman is an off-ramp. So I'm optimistic. I believe that we're in the right place right now where we need to be given. It's not an ideal place, but given the whole set of circumstances, where we were a week ago, where we were 2 weeks ago, we're in the right place right now, where we have Iranians and Americans indirectly meeting in Oman to resolve a single issue, which is the nuclear program. And we've created the potential for success. And hopefully Iran continues to show the maturity and wisdom that it has showed leading up here. Trump is sincere in his desire to avoid a war with Iran, and we find the solution. But I just want to thank you, Danny, for enabling this conversation, because it basically, this topic, and especially as it's attached to Professor Marandi and myself, had gone insane on social media and alternative media. And it passed the point of being productive, and it become counterproductive to achieving the goals and objectives that I think Professor Marandi and I want, which is peace. Peace with dignity, peace with respect for sovereignty, but peace. As I said before, for all the people out there, all I ask you to do is love the Iranians more than you hate America. You spend so much time focused on hating America, on kicking America, on belittling America, that you lose sight of what's really important here, which is the Iranian people, the Iranian nation, and doing what's necessary to ensure that because of America's stupidity, Iran doesn't suffer.
I just want to point out that the Israeli regime has lost over the past year and a half, more than a year and a half. Yes, the resistance has been hurt. Gaza is suffering immensely. Lebanon has been hurt. Yemen is being attacked. Iran is under maximum pressure sanctions. No one else is doing anything. Everyone else has betrayed the Palestinian people. Even those who pretend that they are doing something, they're betraying the Palestinian people. But, I mean, these regimes. But Israel has lost. It's lost. It has not been able to gain a foothold. The burden on the regime, economic, military, political burden is huge. The divide inside the regime is unprecedented. But most importantly, the regime has been delegitimized in the eyes of the world. And the world sees it. China is a good example. As I said, I frequently travel to China. Before October the 7th, most Chinese were indifferent. And I could say that people were divided. Maybe some say even, let's say those who followed the issue, some of them even had some more supporters for Israel. There were more supporters for Israel than for the Palestinians, basically because a business and that sort of thing. But now, I think since over the last, I don't know, year and a half or so, I've been to China maybe 4 or 5 times, been to different cities. It's almost universal, the hatred and contempt. The same is true in Russia. I've been to Russia a few times since. And of course, my experience is anecdotal, but when I speak to colleagues, when I speak to people, the mood in Russia has changed. And the same is true everywhere. Even in India, I think it's, as these images come out, a lot of people are saying, well, the world in any case has turned against the regime. And we just have to keep pushing. And if we keep pushing and if we keep people united across the region, across the world, and expand this global resistance, I'm optimistic. It's not going to end today. It's not going to end next week. It's not going to end next month or next year. But I think the Israeli regime, it's in its dying phases. And on a final note, which is, let's say, a bit more humorous, if anyone has time, although everyone's exhausted if they're listening right now. I'm exhausted. They should go and watch my debate on Piers Morgan. You'll have a good laugh, and you'll see how irrational these pro-Israeli people are, and how Western media is so tightly controlled. You will not have debate anywhere, but when you do have debate, they'll design it in a way so that you can't get your message across, and so that Western narratives are preserved. So we therefore have to, I think your viewers should watch it whenever they have time for a good laugh, but also it just shows that we have to be more active. We have to be more active. It's very tiring for all of us, but imagine what the situation is like in Gaza or in Sana'a and elsewhere. So we have a duty to push hard, to be more active, and there is light at the end of the tunnel.